What's going on, everybody? It's Johnny King with another amazing episode of the Johnny King Show, and I'm so privileged to have with us today Dr. Robert Glover, who is the author of the book that I have referred to many times on the podcast, which is No More Mr. Nice Guy, a proven plan for getting what you want in love, sex, and life. Welcome, Dr. Glover. Thank you for being
Johnny,
here.
thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Absolutely. You're tuning in from Mexico, which we were talking about is so cold during this time of year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm down in Puerto Vallarta. No, this is the hot, humid time of year. This is a good time to take a trip away from Puerto
Yeah,
Vallarta.
yeah, to
The
head up
rest,
to the
another 8 to 10 months out of the year is great. But
yes, yes, absolutely. It's the time of year that, like I said, with my father and anyone else that's living in, the closer to the equator is wondering why they don't head off to Michigan or Maine or something like that.
there you
So
go. Yeah,
yeah,
I find excuses to get up to Seattle to go visit my mother.
absolutely. Oh, it's such a beautiful time to get up there too. But thank you for being here. I'm so excited to have you, just because, like I said, I've talked to men at large. I've been part of No More Mr. Nice Guy groups here in town in Denver, Colorado. A big part of my ahas have come as a result of understanding what you kind of have termed as and correct me if I'm wrong, the nice guy syndrome,
Sure.
right? And explain to those men that might be listening who have no idea, haven't read your book yet, what is the nice guy syndrome and what's that all about?
Sure. Yeah, a nice guy is basically a guy, and this can apply to women as well, but I think we're targeting men right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a guy who doesn't believe he's okay just as he is. And so he believes two things. One, he has to become what he thinks other people want him to be in order to be liked and loved and get his needs met. So he's very chameleon-like. And he also believes he has to hide anything about him that might get a negative reaction from other people.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's just kind of a nutshell story. There's so many different flavors of nice guys, but mostly, yeah, they're trying to become something different and trying to hide something about themselves and think that's the only way that they can get love, get a relationship, succeed, have a good life. And as I'm sure you and I will talk about, there's lots of flaws to the paradigm, the roadmap.
Totally. And I've made a lot of those flaws, unfortunately, or that sort of thing. But I would love to maybe hear from you too, real quick, just because I think it's fascinating. Just the evolution of the nice guy. Like, when did it originate, as you kind of talk about in the beginning of your book? Because to me, it just makes so much sense. I'm like, yes, this is amazing.
Well, probably there's always been nice guys. There's kind of always the milk toast kind of guy, the guy that yes dear, whatever you want dear kind of guy. I think it really blew up. My generation, I'm in my mid 60s now, and my generation might have been the first kind of like, wow, there's a bunch of guys like that out there. And, the baby boomers, maybe trying to be different from our fathers who are detached, disconnected, not connected to their feelings, not connected to their families. Maybe a little self-absorbed, still that patriarchal mindset that, my wife and kids are here to serve me. And so I think a lot of guys in my generation grew up, and maybe were even influenced by our mothers who, as my mother said, I'm raising my boys to be different than their father. She later apologized for that, bless her soul. But yeah, I was trained to be different from my father, who we all perceived as being kind of narcissistic and, selfish, and the world revolved around him. Other influences, I think Vietnam might have had a big influence, where a lot of people decided, to just drop out the whole Vietnam era of let's make love, not war. Just kind of a softer feel for it. Men started wearing tie-dye, growing their hair out. Again, being different from their fathers. Another big piece is that for most men, probably most men for the last, I don't know how many years, 60, 70 years, most of us were highly influenced by women at a young age. Our mothers, preschool, elementary school. I had one male elementary school teacher, so I didn't have a male teacher until I was in, second one until I was in junior high. So most little boys, to get from second to third grade, not only do we have to learn our reading, writing, and arithmetic, but we got to learn how to please a woman. And then I grew up during the 60s with the radical feminism that, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, and erection's a sign of aggression. The best man for the job is a woman. All just, a lot of negativity towards men. And I thought, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that jerk. I don't want to be selfish like my father. I don't want to be that uncaring man that just objectifies women. So those all strongly influenced me. Now, if you kind of fast forward a generation or two, now many boys are being raised in single-parent homes. Fathers are absent, unavailable, don't have a good, solid father figure of any sort. Again, primarily raised by women. Most have been raised with kind of the aftermath of that 60s feminism of just shunning anything that smacks of patriarchy or toxic masculinity, and just going to the other side, other extreme. And then probably the internet has fueled a lot of that as well. So I see this whole nice guy thing as something that has multiplied even since I wrote the book, 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, and I also found interesting too how you talked about the Industrial Revolution playing a role in that men were often teaching little boys how to be men out in the fields, working their plot of land in whatever case. And then once machines came and replaced men and men had to go into cities to find work, they left their boys to be raised by the women of the village or the women of the
their mothers. And yeah, that was a big transition that through most of human history, boys have been mentored and taught about what it means to be masculine, for good or for bad, by the men of the tribe, the men, their dads or grandfathers or uncles. And they were mentored, they were taught, they were initiated. And that has not existed for quite some time now. And so little boys have to grow into adolescence and then adult malehood with really no kind of direction whatsoever, again, other than nowadays whatever you get on the internet or television.
Right.
And that's about it.
That fits right in line with my story that I've talked about in my, I have a failed marriage on my record as well, just because I had no idea what it meant to be a proper, what I don't even know what the term is, just an exceptional husband.
Well, how to show up, how to be conscious, how to set the tone and lead, how to hold on to yourself and not give you away to try to please. I mean, there's a lot of things that can get mixed into it, all the way from addictions to hiding and secrecy. And I have great empathy for my first two ex-wives, what they both had to put up with from me. Both of them were completely different contexts, but yeah, I had no idea. As you said, how to show up. And I don't really like the term failed marriages because, there's two people involved. There's not one person that failed. And I actually have the opinion that monogamous, pair-bonded, lifelong relationships are not supposed to work. They're not wired into our DNA. The fact that people stay together a long time, well, their marriage worked. Well, I've been a marriage therapist for over 30 years. There's a lot of people that stay together and things aren't working. But yeah, no one teaches us how to do that. No one teaches us, number one, that everything we expect from a relationship is probably based on listening to too many pop songs, watching too many movies and too many TV shows, because those kind of relationships aren't real. They don't exist. But we go into a relationship thinking, because I'm attracted to this person, because, I like being with them, because I think they're great or whatever, we're going to live together forever, and it's going to go it'll be even better than it is now, because we'll get to see each other every day and sleep together every night. And then you get a little while into that and going, damn, I need to find a way to get away from this person a little bit. It'd be nice to sleep in my own bed once in a while. So no one teaches us how to get into relationship and maintain ourselves, have healthy differentiation, to set the tone and lead, to create what I call cooperative, reciprocal relationships where we have a lot of resources to help us get our needs met, not just as one person we got into a relationship with.
Mm-hmm. And you're teaching a lot of this now, correct?
Yeah, that's
20 years, right?
I've been doing it for longer than that now.
Yeah,
So that is what I do. And basically, my doctorate, my background is in marriage and family therapy. Mm-hmm. So I did I had a private practice for 25 plus years, starting out primarily working with couples and individuals. Once I started working with nice guys, as I was doing my own nice guy recovery work, and I saw a lot of other guys coming to therapy with me with their wife or girlfriend, were saying the same things I'd been saying for years. I'm a nice guy. I treat her better than her ex. I'm raising her kids. I do everything she wants. I try to make her happy. She's never happy. She's always in a bad mood. She never wants to have sex anymore. When's it going to be my turn? And I thought, these guys are just like me. So that's when, about 25 years ago, I started my first No More Mr. Nice Guy men's group. And when I kind of wrapped up private practice about 6, 7 years ago in the Seattle area, I was leading 5 groups a week of men at that time, No More Mr. Nice Guy groups. So yeah, there's a lot of men out there that are searching for answers of how do I be happy? How do I get love? How do I get consistent, predictable, enjoyable sex? How do I live with purpose and passion? How do I live up to my potential? And I'm thrilled that there really is a worldwide men's movement happening. You know, people like you, it's just blossoming around the world of men's coaches, men's groups, men's programs, and there's lots of different doors into this where people might come into it, men might come in it through martial arts or a divorce recovery group or some sort of consciousness type program or yoga or pickup. I mean, there's so many ways that men are out there looking for tribe and they're looking for answers and they're looking for initiation. And so, so the fact that, you were mentioning that for X number of years you worked with women, but now for the last couple of years you've worked with men. And I've worked almost exclusively with men for 20 years now. And it is so fulfilling and men are so hungry, looking for answers, looking for, they've been told all their lives what not to be. And they don't have a real good idea of what to be.
And that's what I've thought that too. And again, Tony Robbins, but where your focus goes, your energy flows. I think Jim Rohn even said it before that. But I was the result of that because I knew very much of what I didn't want to become like my father.
Sure.
Which was just my resentment towards him because he was working so much that I hardly saw him as a little boy. And I never wanted to be that. I wanted to be that active, participating father and husband, but when I found myself married, I really was so lost. So it was the end of that relationship 10 years ago that really kind of became the catalyst towards growth. And that's, I think, what a lot of guys kind of question, like, where do I start? And maybe that you just answered it, which is like, man, you could start in martial arts or therapy or any type of rites of passage, initiations and things like that, right? There's no right or wrong place to start.
No. And I find that most men, at least that come to me for whatever reason, take a class with me or do workshops with me or back when I was doing groups, they usually come at some stage of life where something just isn't working well for them. Most common is relationship. It might be a guy that just, can't get a date, doesn't know how to talk to women, is a virgin or has only had sex once or twice in his life, and they want to change that. Or as you mentioned, when a relationship ended. So a lot of guys, when it's about to end or it is ending or just ended, a lot of guys come seek me out. For other guys, it might be more about their work and career, where they know they could be accomplishing so much more, but they find themselves procrastinating or avoiding launching that business they've always wanted to launch, or watching other people at work pass them up that they know that these other people aren't any more qualified than them. And so it's usually when we're feeling stuck or in a repetitive place or going through a painful place that we go looking for some answers. And luckily there's a lot, it's a lot easier to find them now. When I started my nice guy recovery 25 plus years ago, luckily there was some stuff out there. There's Robert Bly, Iron John, kind of the whole mythopoetic movement. And, I went out and attended a few programs where you went out in the woods and beat a drum and held the talking stick and said ho and stuff like that. And that was a good start, but that was really about all there was. And I'm just thrilled that nowadays you don't have to go very far to find a man's coach, a man's program, and men doing good work. And I mean, that excites me so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is pretty cool given the opportunity, and yet sometimes with that too, it's almost like choice fatigue. They don't know where to begin.
That can happen. That can happen, and yeah, that's a good problem to have. That'd be like saying, I've got five amazing women all wanting to get with me. What do I do? Hey, I've got five choices in Denver of ways I can go connect deeply with men. Which one do I pick? That's a good problem.
Yeah. And like you said, there's no right or wrong answer. I guess it just depends on the individual, or am I wrong about that? If someone comes to you, where do you begin? If someone's where I was 10 years ago, or just feeling totally stuck in that pattern of kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of low, self-esteem and everything else, where do they go, or what do they do to at least start moving the ball down the field a little bit?
Well, that's a good question, and of course that's different for everybody. But where I start, especially with men, is that, again, going back to what you and I were talking about, so many of us lack tribe. I hear so many nice guys especially say, well, I don't have guy friends because all guys want to do is watch sports and drink beer and objectify women.
Right.
And I'll go, men do that, and there's nothing wrong with those things, but there's a lot of men out there who are much deeper than that. And that's an excuse a lot of nice guys will use because they're more comfortable with women. You and I were chatting just a little bit about that. We like that validation we get from being the good guy with women. We listen to them talk about their problems. We do things for them. We volunteer to help their sister move. We're available whenever they want. And, oh, you're such a nice guy. And so for a lot of us who were raised primarily by our mothers, by women, we are alienated from men. We're disconnected from men. And so I tell men, I think the first place we need to start, I've been telling guys, I say this in the book, don't try to do this alone. Too many men, we're the lone wolf, I'll just do it myself. I'll do my work myself. We can't, right? We need the sharpening of a group of men. We need the support of a group of men. We need the accountability of a group of men. We need a safe place to just go open up and be ourselves and let go of our toxic shame, our self-limiting beliefs, get more accurate feedback about who we are, and just have that depth of connection. And honestly, since I've been working with men, and I've got a coach, I'm in a men's program, I've been in it for 3 years now, I can honestly say I feel more love from men in my life than I've ever felt from the women in my life, and I'm on my third marriage. And that's where I tell men to start. Start building a tribe. Find a tribe and go start opening up. Be honest. Be you. Reveal yourself. Share. Take risks. Be vulnerable. And men can find a place to do that. I started in a 12-step program. And it was such a great thing to be in this 12-step program, and it was all men. And I could just go every week and just start telling everything I'd never told anybody before. And nobody freaked out. Nobody thought I was, a freak or a creep. Or they said, thank you for sharing, Robert. That was it, And then I'd listen to their stories, and I didn't think there was anything wrong with them, even though they all, when we all tell our stories, we think, oh, no, I'm terrible. Everybody's going to see how terrible I am. And nobody thinks you're terrible. That's where I'd say start, is you got to have a tribe. You have to have a place to start being vulnerable, start releasing toxic shame, and start getting a more accurate feedback about who you are, rather than these beliefs we've been packing around, maybe since we were little boys or babies even.
No doubt. Talk about toxic shame. I mean, I've talked about it a fair amount, and of course I've done, read on various authors and that sort of thing. I love what Brene Brown says about shame, but how does it look like in your practice and your work with men in terms of toxicity around shame?
It's core, and I talk a lot about it in No More Mr. Nice Guy, and in a way that's a little bit phenomenal. I remember early in my second marriage, my second wife was really into self-help, and she really is what prodded me into go work on me. In fact, she said, I'm going to leave you if you don't go work on you. And that was, about 3 years into our marriage. And she said, everybody thinks you're such a nice guy, but you're not. You're really hurtful to me, and you're passive aggressive. And I had a PhD in marriage and family therapy, and I'm not sure I even knew what passive aggressiveness was. And I remember she was reading John Bradshaw books like Healing the Shame That Binds You. And I remember she's in bed reading, and she goes, here, listen to this. This describes you. And she'd read this parts about shame to me. And honestly, I'm not a dumb guy. And like I said, I had a PhD at 29, and I'm listening going, I'm not sure I even understand the concept, let alone how it applies to me. And I thought, but I can kind of see how it applies to you because you think you're worthless. I don't think I'm worthless, but you tell me all the time how bad you are. I don't think I'm bad. And as I began to do my work and like say in that 12-step group, and when I realized there were so many things about me I never let anybody see, you know, thoughts, feelings, mistakes, anything about me, I always kept it really closely guarded. What I came to realize is a nice guy, I'd kept all my shame in a pretty locked down, airtight compartment inside, and I thought, oh, I do everything so good, and because I treat people well and I give to people, and you know, I'm not like my dad, and I'm not like those jerks that people should love me and like me. But that was all coming from a place that I didn't think I was okay on the inside. And where the toxic shame really comes from is really, it starts when we're babies. That a baby by nature is grandiose and narcissistic and the center of their universe. At an emotional level, this is precognitive, a baby believes they are the cause of everything that happens to them. So anytime they have any kind of uncomfortable experience, they're hungry and don't get fed right away, they're cold and don't get held, they're lonely and don't get held, they're dirty and don't get changed, or maybe, you know, none of us had perfect parents, so, you know, maybe there was turmoil in your family, maybe there's abuse, maybe there's addiction. All of these things get internalized inaccurately by babies and children at an emotional level, not a cognitive level, at an emotional level into a very primitive part of our brain called the amygdala, stores up emotional memory about who we are and what the world is like. And it's completely inaccurate because it comes from that narcissistic, grandiose place of an infant. But it gets stored up in the emotional part of our brain, and now we carry that with us into childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and the amygdala is wired into every other part of our brain. So how we think about ourselves, how we think about the world, how we think about the opposite sex, about relationship, about success, all of those things are driven by that emotional memory stored up in that primitive part of our brain. And for many, many, many people, that's in the form of toxic shame. And toxic shame is an emotional belief, not a cognitive belief. We actually start finding cognitive things to support it, but it's an emotional belief that there's something wrong with me. I'm unlovable, I'm defective, I'm broken. And then as I said, we'll go looking for things to support that emotional belief system. So a big part of, I believe, any therapeutic process, not just for men overcoming nice guy syndrome, but probably almost any therapeutic process, is us finding ways to become aware of and release our toxic shame. And as they often say in recovery world, that's like peeling back layers of an onion over time. And that's why I go back to, we got to find safe people in a safe place to go start revealing ourselves. Nobody reacts negatively, to what we've shared, and we get a more accurate feedback of who we are. We're not this terrible, unlovable, worthless, blob walking the planet, and we can start rewiring, overriding our emotional operating system. And we may always pack around some of that internalized shame, but at least the more you do this work, you see it quicker. You see it easier when it starts coming up in forms of, self-criticism or negativity or judgment or avoidance of things. You see it quicker. And then if you have a support system, you can go deal with it quicker.
I think you bring up a good point, though, and something that a lot of guys ask. I mean, I've been having a lot of conversations about, just racism and race and that sort of thing with a bunch of my black friends here in town, and a lot of them have said to white people such as myself who want to have that conversation, you need to go find the right person to have the conversation that it's a safe, a safe landing spot to have that conversation. And so whether we're talking about race or we're talking about shame, I guess guys have asked me, well, how do I know who to trust or if they're the right person to talk to?
Yeah.
To take on that type of conversation.
Like when it comes to the shame part, some good places to start might be a coach, a therapist, a 12-step group, a men's group. It could be a minister, a priest, or a rabbi. I often tell guys it's probably not your wife, your girlfriend, or a family member, because for two reasons. Number one, we don't want to show them the worst of ourselves because we're afraid they're going to quit loving us. And our wife, girlfriend, family members have at least some emotional investment in us not changing. Even if they're telling us, I want you to change, if you do start changing, that will cause anxiety and fear in them because they don't know where that's going to lead. So people that have some degree of investment in us staying the way we are not the best people to go reveal our deepest self to. As I said, I started, well, I'll give you an example that I share sometimes. When I was pretty early on in doing my own work, I was going to this 12-step group for sex addicts. Quickly found out I wasn't a sex addict. I wasn't having enough sex to be a sex addict. But I had acted sexually inappropriately, and so it was a good venue for me to start releasing shame. I also got to working with a therapist around that same time. And I remember this was really early on for me. And I had a sexual impulse, and it was pretty dark, and it scared me. I didn't act on it, but the fact that I actually even entertained this kind of dark sexual impulse. Yeah, remember, I was a nice guy. I grew up in this fundamental Christian church. I've got 2 degrees in religion. I was a minister for 8 years. I saw a previous lifetime, but, I grew up, trying to be a really good guy, a really good boy. And so I had this dark sexual impulse, and so I went to my 12-step group. Met like at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I shared it with these guys. And the only reaction I got was, thank you for sharing, Robert. So, okay, that wasn't so bad. Nobody thought I was terrible. So, and then like an hour later, I had an appointment with my therapist. It was a woman therapist. And I went and I told her. And she just looked at me with compassion and said, well, let's explore that. Let's see what that's about for you. And we did. We just explored what might be the emotional dynamic of that piece. And then I'm driving back home and I thought, wow, that went well. I never would have told anybody those kinds of things, 6 months prior to that. And I thought, I probably need to go tell my wife. And I used to always tell my wife her middle name ought to be Overreact because that's what she did in every situation. And she never overreacted when I told her that because she knew it was true. And I thought, even if she overreacts, has a negative reaction to what I'm going to go tell her, I'm still batting 666, and as a baseball fan, I'm thinking that's not bad. That's not bad. 2 for 3. So I drove home. I said I got something to tell you, and I said so. We went back to the bedroom. I still remember this, and we sat down, and I said I need to tell you I already talked with my 12-step group about this. I talked with my therapist about it, but I said here's the thing. I had this sexual impulse a week or so ago. I said it kind of scared me. And I said, so I told my 12-step group, I told my therapist, and I want to tell you now that this is what the story was. And she kind of looked at me, no big reaction, and she said, that kind of scares me. And she said, it doesn't surprise me. And I'm glad you told your 12-step group, and I'm glad you told your therapist, and I'm glad you told me. And she never mentioned it again. I'm thinking, wow, this is good stuff. But it probably would not have been a good idea to start that with her, right? To just go to her, because I would have had a lot of shame, a lot of fear of being attacked, and she would have felt that, my anxiety, but by me going and doing that work with safe people first, I could then go share it with her, and she could just hear it as information and know I was addressing it. I was working on it. It wasn't getting repressed or pushed down and going to come out in some indirect, hurtful kind of way. And it made her feel safer. Even though it was something she wasn't thrilled to hear, it made her feel safer. So yeah, start this safe work. Again, whether it's 12-step group, a men's group, a coach, a therapist. It can be a best buddy, somebody that sees the best in you, is not going to react. But start revealing everything about you that you really don't want anybody to know about you. And the men's program I'm in, that I participate in, we still do practices like that. Every few months, we'll just do kind of a go-around. Everybody's got like 30 seconds, 60 seconds to just unload. What I don't want you to know about me, and just list off 5, 10 things. What I don't want you to know about me, what I don't want you to know about me, whatever we might be keeping in. And after every time we do that exercise, everybody gets closer to each other. We feel more connected because we say, hey, I'm not alone, or he's just like me, or, oh, I said that and nobody had a negative reaction. And now we can let people get closer to us and let them really know us.
I love that, and I think it's so spot on because I do feel like vulnerability kind of begets more vulnerability. It's true
It
power.
does. It does. And you mentioned Brene Brown, and and she's you can't help but watch like her TED talk. I remember first time I saw it, I thought I'm in love with this woman. Just that she was just so self-effacing and talking about being vulnerable and studying it, but yet having such a hard time being that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, vulnerability is welcoming to people, but we got to practice that with safe people first.
I think it's interesting because I do feel like in the men's space, and I see it on social media, whatever. There's a lot of men that are kind of championing, this is how men should be. In my
Yeah.
kind of standpoint of like, I don't know if there is a clear defined box that everyone should be able to fit into, and if not, maybe that's part of the problem. But I do know that in my mind, growing up, I was like, I don't want to be that porn watching, you know, all the things that you mentioned earlier that
Yeah.
stereotypical guys are. But then I also found myself, and I've talked to a lot of other buddies who, especially in relationships, found themselves in a place where they're, you know, wanting to have an intimate relationship with someone. In my case, various girlfriends or whatever, and they just said, "Oh, you're kind of like a brother to me. I don't
Uh-huh.
actually find you attractive. You're kind of just that nice guy. There's
Yeah.
no
That whole
depth to
friend
you."
zone
Or
thing.
yeah, the
Yeah.
friend zone thing. How do men even navigate through that, whether they're straight or gay or everything in between? How do they find that? Because that dynamic between the masculine and feminine, I feel like needs to be there. That polarity.
Yeah, well, you've just about asked me three questions. We could probably go off on any one.
Yeah, right, right.
The first question I heard was about, kind of you can find anything on the internet for good or for bad. So, you probably, you might say that even white extremism and nationalism and neo-Nazism is one form of the new men's movement.
Right.
Is not a part that I claim, but yeah, out there on the internet, you got a lot of people telling a lot of people, here's what it means to be fill in the blank, right? To be successful. Well, you gotta, build a website and have a click funnel and you gotta affiliate and here's how you be successful. Well, there's a lot of ways to go about being successful. Um, for me, I don't like stereotypes. I don't like caricatures of like this is a man or this isn't a man. And even no more Mr. Nice Guy, even the nice guy, it could be easy to turn it into this meme that just either becomes a caricature, a silly, easily dismissed caricature, or it could be this identity that we're like locked into. So I'm really careful about pinning really anything on men. And as I said, I think there's a lot of ways to come at this. I think at some point, hopefully, it leads us to being more conscious, more aware, more in the moment, more connected to ourselves, more connected to others, more embracing of every aspect of ourselves, even the parts that make us uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean saying, here's what you should be. And I know because like the men's program I'm in is called an embodiment program, a men's where we're embodying consciousness into our physical nervous system.
Right.
And there's a lot of things I really like about it. And is kind of on the edge of one part of things where, everything is about, well, if it's not going deeper into consciousness and embodiment, it's a waste or it's trivial. And I don't hear that in my program, but it's one step away from it almost. And again, it's telling, well, man, if you're not like this, and I do get a kick out of looking at a lot of men's coaches' websites, and nowadays a lot of them look a lot alike, so they're all using the same template. But I get a kick out of if they show a man or a group of men, they're hyper masculine a lot of times, or a lot of times, they got to have a six-pack abs or the big hipster beard, or dreadlocks, or some mix of color. It's almost like this idea of what an evolved man looks like, and you and I are as white as we can be, and neither one of us looks much like this kind of ideal man. This almost like on women's romance books, the ideal guy, or on the cover of Men's Health magazine.
Fabio.
It's the same guy with the same six-pack abs on every Men's Health cover. No, we men come in all forms, all colors, all ages, skinny, fat, black, white, orange. We come in all kinds of packages. And so what like you, I kind of hate us starting to squeeze men where you got to be like this, or you got to be red pill, or you got to be this way, or you got to be that way. That I don't like that approach. Again, we got to find what works well for us, but mainly if we can just find ways to be more conscious, more in the moment, more connected, more embracing of all things about ourselves, more open to love. That's the kind of stuff I'd like to see men learning how to do and finding tribe to help them do that.
Yeah, me too. Amen. Absolutely. I feel like coming out of my first marriage that I read Codependency No More, and I was kind of mind blown, be like, oh my, how codependent I had become on my mom.
I read that early on as well.
Right. I'm like, oh my gosh, is there a direct correlation between being a nice guy and codependency, or was that just my
No, they are one and the same.
one and the same, right?
They are. In fact, I made a very conscious decision when I was writing No More Mr. Nice Guy not to use the term codependency. At the time I was writing No More Mr. Nice Guy, I started writing it almost 30 years ago. There was nothing for men in the whole codependency literature areas. Prior to that, it was all written for people who are in relationship with addicts and women. Women who love too much, Codependent No More, Pia Melody Beatty, people like that. Good stuff, but nothing was addressed to men in particular. And I read all those books, and the John Bradshaw books, and nothing. I was seeing was a lot of men just like me, and all the books we can go read were really all written for women, because as many publishers told me when I was trying to get my book published, men won't buy a self-help book. So we're just going to keep publishing the books for women. And that's not true. My book's been out 20 years, and my royalty checks keep getting bigger every year. So men buy self-help books.
That's awesome.
But so yeah, I decided not to use the word codependency in describing, because I wanted to see if I could describe nice guy syndrome, especially as it showed up in men, without me, number one, taking the shortcut and just calling it codependency, and number two, without people taking preconceived ideas of what codependency is. Oh, that's just something you get if you're like married to an addict, or that's just something you get if you're a woman and can't stand up for yourself. I really wanted to address it. But yeah, nice guy syndrome is codependency. It's borrowed functioning. I only exist if there is somebody else, i.e. somebody to get my value from, somebody to take care of, somebody to fix, someone to keep me from feeling lonely. That's what codependency is. It's borrowed functioning. I can't be just alone within myself, have value just within myself, feel fulfilled just within myself. I'm dependent on another or others. And maybe many of us are that way to some degree or another. And it shows up in some very distinct ways in nice guys, in the caretaking, the pleasing, the fixing, the picking women that we can fix them, avoidance of conflict, not living up to our potential, avoiding risk, letting fear control us. Just there's a lot of patterns that show up, especially in the men that I work with, and apparently you work with quite a bit now as well.
Yeah. When we're talking about the topic of avoiding confrontation and speaking our truth and having those tough conversations maybe with your significant other, your spouse, I hear that a lot as well. I'd rather just not rock the boat.
Yeah, go along to get along. Yeah, blah.
Are there certain, someone was sitting in front of you, if I were sitting in front of you with this challenge, I'd be like, I just have a hard time really bringing these things up to my spouse. What's the beginning steps to actually make some progress in terms of actually being able to speak, like you said, and then have that mature conversation?
Well, again, I'd say go talk to some safe people first. And this is not at all uncommon, what you're talking about. I would say for a great many nice guys, we're conflict avoidant. And that's what a lot of guys will tell me coming in. Yeah, I avoid conflict. And I'm conflict avoidant. My mother, bless her soul, 85 years old and still ticking. And she shared with at least 2 or 3 of the significant women in my life at some point or another, Bobby never did like conflict. And I think that was her way of saying, be nice to my boy. Don't pick on my boy. And, and every time I would hear her say that, I'm thinking, no, I never did like conflict. And I'm thinking, who the fuck does? And there are people that like conflict. I seem to marry them. But I never did, right? And I thought, if we can just like talk about this, or if we can just find a solution, why do we need conflict? And so I always have been somewhat conflict avoidant. It's a piece I've had to work on, because you can't have integrity if you're avoiding conflict. If you're letting things build up, if you're not saying what's true to you, if you're not asking for what you want, if you have resentments that are growing, if you have needs that aren't getting met, you've got to be willing to risk rocking the boat. And again, practice this with safe people, first off, because for most of us nice guys, when it comes to our partner, they don't feel safe because we're afraid they're going to get mad at us, they're going to reject us, they're going to quit having sex with us, they're going to leave us, whatever those fears are. And many of us do get with those kind of women that if you say anything that upsets them, there's all hell to pay. I've been through that. I don't hang out with those kind of women anymore, but I used to. And so practice it with somebody and keep it as simple as possible. I mean, try to avoid blame. And my probably the easiest, simplest way I know is if something's bothering you, go to your partner and say, something's been bothering me. Are you available to talk? Are you available to listen? And just tell them what's bothering them. Most guys can tell me in 2 or 3 sentences what's bothering them. Well, my wife never touches me anymore. I'd like her to touch me more. Well, that's 2 sentences. That could have been one long run-on sentence. Every time I try to talk with my wife, she blows up. All right. Most guys can tell me in 1 or 2 sentences what's bothering them, but when they try to go then to talk to their partner about it, they think they have to build a case and give examples and have this ironclad argument. But it probably is as simple as to say, I want to tell you, I got a problem. It doesn't feel like you touch me as much as you used to, and I always liked the way you touch me, and I'd like you to do that more. And most people can hear that. Now, there are some people, their shame will get triggered and they'll have a shame attack. All they hear is they're bad, they're wrong, they don't do it right, and then they'll shame dump, i.e. make you feel bad for bringing that up and triggering their shame. And believe me, as a marriage therapist, I've seen that happen plenty of times. And all I can really say is that if you practice doing that with your partner, don't attack them, don't accuse them, just say, something's been bothering me, or I've got a problem, can you help me? I'd like us to have sex more often. Is there any way we can work together to make that happen? Bringing in the working together seems to really help. I'd like us to eat healthier. We're both gaining weight. I'd like us to eat healthier. Can we work together to make that happen? If we can do that in just 2 or 3 sentences, following that 2-sentence rule, as I call it, whatever needs to be said can be said best in 2 sentences or less. Do it with love. Let's be a team about it. If your partner continuously reacts negatively to you doing that, that's probably not a good person to be with. Right? And you might even have to have a conversation with them to say, I've got a problem. Anytime I bring up a problem with you, you overreact to it and you go off on me. Is there a way we can work on doing that differently? And that's what I call masculine leadership. It's not like we're deciding everything that's going to happen, everything we're going to do. It's you setting a tone in the relationship for being open and honest and transparent and real and conscious and dealing with problems head on rather than letting them build up and blow up or come out in passive aggressive ways.
That leadership is so key.
Yeah, it is, and I'll say it again. I hate conflict, and so I'm stereotypical avoidant of it. But I found that if you just deal with it early on, not after it's built up. My second wife, the one the overreact to everything woman, that's who I was married to when I wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy. And like I said, she got me into personal recovery, so I'm eternally grateful. You and I are talking because of her. She got me into recovery. And she coined a phrase that I use in the book called victim pukes. And that's where the nice guy's been keeping it in, keeping it in, keeping it in, rehearsing stories in his head, gathering evidence, and and then finally something happens and it just all blows up. And it's not pretty, Well, because we nice guys are not experienced fighters, we're not fair fighters either. We bitch, slap, and we hit below the belt, and we're mean. And then we have the shame attack. Oh no, I'm such a terrible person. I just acted like my father, and then we try to make it all better again. And I remember my ex would ask me from time to time after I'd have one of these victim pukes, as she named them, she'd say, how long have you been thinking about that? How long have you been feeling resentful and angry about that? And I'd think about it, I don't know, 6 months maybe, a year. And she'd go, really? She goes, did it ever cross your mind to talk to me about it? I'd think about it and go, no, actually not once. It was in my head all the time, but I never thought, maybe I should actually tell her this. Yeah. And so yes, just telling them that is the much more loving thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think just looking for that win-win is so key. And I think that win-win concept is tough sometimes for guys because it's, at least for me, having grown up playing sports so much, it was oftentimes I was looking to win, and
there's a winner and a loser, yeah,
and a loser,
and yeah, and again, if you can couch it as let's be a team in this, can we, and it doesn't even have to be win-win, but if everybody is cooperating together for something that seems like a valid goal, yeah, and then hopefully it is win-win. Hopefully everybody feels good about where that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of wrapping things up, where do you feel like, I think it's interesting, the older I get too, the more I see, yes, technology changes, the landscape of life and everything else changes, and yet behaviorally, we're all very similar to how our parents were versus how generations were before us. What do you see as a very kind of, what's the thing that men are probably being faced with or needing to focus on the most right now? Maybe you've already said it during this conversation, but what do you feel like is the thing that men should be sinking their teeth into if they feel like they're unhealthy or need to grow?
I'll go back to tribe again. You mentioned that maybe we're not all that different from our parents or grandparents, and that's probably true. And we're probably not all that different from our forefathers that walked the planet 1 million years ago, hunting and gathering. And for 1.5 million years, so anthropologists tell us, our ancestors wandered the planet, hunted and gathered, and lived in tribes. Everything was communal, everything was shared, including sexual access. About 10,000 years ago, so a little tiny pinpoint in human history and evolution, so less than 10,000 years ago, some of our ancestors kind of disbanded from tribe and started not wandering and hunting and gathering, and they started staying in one place and growing stuff. And kind of an ownership mentality began to evolve. Instead of everything being communal, I own this piece of land, I own this cow, I own this tree, I own this woman, I own these kids. And that's what we now call patriarchy. That's only existed for about less than 10,000 years. Even for a good bit of that time, the men still connected with men. They fought with went to war with each other, worked in the field together. It's probably, you mentioned earlier the whole Industrial Revolution. Up to about 200 years ago or so, men worked together, side by side. Boys grew up in that environment. And now, especially after World War II, we're highly industrialized now. We've got nuclear, we've gone from extended family to nuclear family to, half of all men under 35 now are single. Now, that's the first time that's happened in history. So we've become more and more and more individualized and isolated, and for both men and women, less and less connected from same-sex, same-gender companions and connection. And when I was doing a lot of marriage therapy, one of the first things I tell every couple when they walked in my office was one of the best things they could do for their marriage was to have good same-sex friends. We've gotten too dependent on our intimate relationship to try to fill all of our needs and, fill all the voids and all the gaps. And that's why we end up resenting the hell out of each other. One person of the opposite sex cannot come fill all of our needs. We need tribe for that. So yeah, especially talking to men, I'll keep bringing it back to tribe and some form of masculine initiation. Learning how to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. We don't have that much anymore. Nowadays, we're raised, everything's instantaneous. If you want something, go get it on the internet. We can go watch Netflix. We can go play video games. We can go smoke dope. We can go do whatever it is and not have to feel anything. And I think to truly live up to our potential, to really show up, penetrate this planet, put a dent in the universe, we got to do it with tribe, and we got to be comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. And it takes initiation to do that. And we need our brothers. We need our tribe to do it.
Couldn't think of a better note to end it on. This tribe is about connecting, and I appreciate you taking some time to connect with me. And,
Johnny, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
And I appreciate the work you're doing in the world and with men. And I count that there's one more man out there working with men, making the world a better place.
Yep. And I can't tell you how many times I've recommended your book, and men that have read it said it blew their minds. So it's the beautiful thing about what you've done. It's kind of cool to see how the ripple effect just keeps going.
I like seeing it. Believe me, when, as I said, when many publishers said, "Oh, men won't buy a self-help book," and it's nice to know they were really wrong, and it's nice to know that the books had a big impact on the world. It makes me feel good.
Yeah, so cool. Well, if people want to learn more about you or get in touch or whatever the case, where can they find?
They can find me at drglover.com on the internet. That's just drglover.com. If they Google No More Mr. Nice Guy, if they Google Robert Glover, I've got like the top 10 spaces on both of those Google searches. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Easy enough. Well, thank you again for sharing your wisdom and your insight with us. And I know that so many guys are going to be, and women are going to be blessed by this. So thank you again.
Thank you, Johnny. It was a good time. Thank you.
All right.